All right, so we're not even halfway there yet. I'm gonna wait 2 more minutes and I'm gonna start. All right. So here's where we're at. Properties of urine. Now, obviously, we've already done the urine test, but this, of course, assuming you're about to read ahead, you should already have known all of this stuff going in, right? So let's just run through again just to make sure. So, appearance. What does urine normally look like? I'm sure we all know that urine is supposed to be somewhere between very pale yellow and a dark yellow color. Um, Even if the urine is still dark yellow, it is still considered to be normal, right? So normal urine can run from a pale yellow to a dark yellow. Now, amber is not the same as yellow. I think I mentioned to you guys that amber starts to look like a yellowish brown, or more like a brownish yellow, really, right? So that means you should be able to tell the difference between yellow and amber, right? All right, easy enough. Now, that's your thing there's on. Now, odor. Fundamentally, when urine first comes out of the body, it just really is not supposed to have a strong smell, right? So fresh urine, it should virtually be odorless. Now, stale urine is different, obviously, right? Now, the reason for the difference is very simple. Urine contains urea. Urea is a compound made from ammonia by enzymes in your body. If you leave it long enough, bacteria in the environment will produce their own enzymes and they will degrade the urea right back to ammonia. So when you smell what you consider to be that strong urine smell, it's coming from ammonia and other substances in the urine that have been worked on by the bacteria, right? So, quote unquote, stale urine smell That's where it's coming from, right? Now, that said, you may or may not know this. I'm sure some of you do. That back in the day, dry cleaners would soak clothes in stale urine to help to get stains out, right? And believe it or not, it actually does work, right? Because of the high ammonia concentration and the high bacteria concentration in the urine, it is very good at getting rid of organic stains. Ammonia is great for that, right? Now, these days, of course, they have other chemicals that they use, but most of those chemicals still contain ammonia, right? So they were onto something back then. Now, specific gravity. Remember what specific gravity is. Specific gravity is a comparison between the mass of a substance relative to pure water. Now remember, the water has to be pure. So we assume water, pure water, has a specific gravity of 1, right? With a lot of, with pretty much, technically speaking, as many zeros after the 1 as you want, right? That would be 100% pure water, which in nature is pretty much impossible, right? Even in the lab, that's impossible. But if you can get the water down to 1.0000, another zero for pure water, then that's good enough, right? Urine, though, has a range of 1.000 to 1.035, right? So obviously 1.000 is very, 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 very light color urine, right? It's pretty much water. Whereas 1.035 is very dark, amber. That's the kind of urine that has so much urochrome in there that it's so thick you could almost walk on it, right? Then you have the relative osmolarity of the urine. Remember what osmolarity is looking at? Is looking at the concentration of water, in this case, relative to the things dissolved in the water, okay? So the osmolarity of blood is around 300 milliosmoles. Now, urine's osmolarity can actually range from 50 milliosmoles, this is per liter, by the way, to 1200 milliosmoles. What is this saying to you? This is saying to you that very dilute urine has more water in there than your blood has, right? And very concentrated urine can be up to 4 times more concentrated than your blood is. And so remember what we're talking about. We're talking about salt relative to the amount of water in the blood. Now, because of this difference, this idea about drinking urine if you lost at sea or lost in the desert has come about, right? Technically speaking, if you get lost and you collect the very first urine you produce while you're lost and you drink that urine, chances are that urine has a concentration of less than 300 milliosmol, which means there's more water in that urine than there is in the blood by comparison. So yes, if you drink that 50 to 100 milliosmol urine, your body can get water from that. Here's where the myth comes in, that you can keep doing this over and over again. The second time you urinate after being lost at sea, without being able to drink a lot of water, your urine is, of course, going to become much more concentrated, right? Far more concentrated than blood. So if you drink urine that concentrated, it is going to dehydrate the heck out of you, right? So if anybody ever asks, yes, you can probably drink the first urine, assuming you're well hydrated when you produce that urine, but afterwards, no, right? Anyway, pH range of the urine. It's usually around pH of 6 or so, but anything between 4.5 and 8.2 is considered normal or relatively normal, though obviously 8.2 is on the very high side of normal, right? And as we know, urine is also mostly water. So 95% water, with the rest being urea, salt, and other substances dissolved in it, right? Now, there we go. Urea, salt, potassium chloride is of course a type of salt. I think we mentioned creatinine already and uric acid. You should be familiar with all of these already, right? Then now, volume. Remember earlier in this presentation, we had spoken about how you produce about 180 liters of filtrate a day. 180 liters of filtrate. And of that filtrate, you take back 99% of it. Right? So 99% of the filtrate you're going to take right back into the body, which is why by the time you're dead, you're done. You end up with 1 to 2 liters of actual urine per day. Right? Why is that? Because you're taking back the vast majority of the fluid that you have filtered out of the blood, because that stuff is needed to keep your blood your blood at isotonic to the tissues, right? Y'all remember hypertonic, isotonic, right? So you need that water to go right back in the blood because you don't want your blood to become hypertonic, right? You don't want your blood to be more concentrated than your cells because they'll draw water out of your cells and kill them, right? All right. Now that said, if you produce a little less than 500 mils of urine a day, that is called oliguria, or in some cases, oliguria. This usually indicates you are dehydrated, right? Dehydrated. It's not necessarily an indicator of any serious disease. Maybe the day hot, you haven't drunk very much, so you produce a little urine here and there, no big deal, right? That said, if you're producing either no urine for the day or less than 100 mils of urine, you're not merely dehydrated, you're severely dehydrated. And at these kind of levels here, 0 to 100 mils, your kidneys are at risk of shutting down because of how dehydrated you are, right? So anuria is usually a sign of serious problems. Oliguria, minor problems. You just need some water. You know, you ate too much salted peanuts, you didn't drink enough juice that day, whatever it is. You know, you're a little dehydrated, no big deal. Around 500 mils of urine a day, fine, right? 500 mils, remember, is about the size of a bottle of soda. You know, one of the ones that well, not the 2 liter obviously, but the other size ones, right? Now, I do believe I mentioned some special types of diabetes relative to urine in class already, right? So I would have told you about diabetes mellitus, type 1 and type 2. These are the ones that you're the most familiar with, right? We call these insulin dependent diabetes. Insulin dependent diabetes. Why? Because insulin has to be involved. So, for example, type 1 diabetes here is caused due to a person's inability to produce insulin. Now, this normally happens during childhood, which is why they call this kind of diabetes juvenile diabetes, okay? So juvenile diabetes, lack the ability to produce insulin, happens from when you're a child normally, right? Whereas type 2 diabetes, of course, is adult onset diabetes. This is normally associated not with the inability to produce urine. You can produce urine just fine. Let's say hemi urine. I mean, insulin. You can produce insulin just fine. The problem is that your body is becoming less sensitive to the impact of insulin. So we say that type 2 diabetes is caused by insulin insensitivity, right? So when it starts to happen, when your body becomes less and less sensitive to insulin, it's your pituitary gland responds by producing greater and greater concentrations of insulin. So if you test the blood of a type 2 diabetic, their insulin level is through the roof, right? But because of how badly damaged the receptors for insulin are in the blood, the insulin doesn't function so hot. So it takes a long time to clear glucose from the blood, right? In a type 1 diabetic, if you test their blood for insulin, you basically won't find any because they lack the ability to make the insulin entirely, right? All right. Now, we also mentioned, there was a question? I thought there was, okay, all right. We also mentioned another type of diabetes in class on Tuesday called gestational diabetes. Remember, this is the one that is onset during a woman's pregnancy. And after the pregnancy, this type of diabetes tends to go away, okay? So it's temporary type 2 diabetes, basically. But remember what I said to you in class. Even though it is temporary and it does go away, it is normally a sign of things to come. And by that I mean most women who present, as we call it, with gestational diabetes will eventually develop full-blown, full-scale diabetes, right? Type 2. All right. So far, so good, right? This one here, I don't think we mentioned. Did we? Pituitary diabetes, which is caused by hypersecretion of growth hormone. Right? Hypersecretion of growth hormone. Then you have adrenal diabetes, hypersecretion of cortisol. Here's how this works. The growth hormone, what it normally does is it promotes the conversion of glycogen, which your body stores. That's why your body stores glucose, right? Glycogen, into glucose, and then dumps that glucose into the blood. The reason it's doing this is because during growth, of course, your body will need that extra glucose to make ATP while it's doing its metabolic reactions like cell division and all that stuff, right? So since it's usually your body is using the glucose that growth hormone is providing, your blood sugar doesn't spike very high, right? But if you produce so much growth hormone that your body produces such a massive volume of sugar that you can't take it all out of the blood, then when you test the person's blood, they'll come back as having sugar in the blood, of course, positive for diabetes, right? And that is hypersecretion of growth hormone. And cortisol works in a similar way. Cortisol promotes the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. So the more cortisol you have in the blood, the more glucose you will automatically have in the blood, right? So all of the types of diabetes I mentioned here are going to be associated with increased sugar levels in the blood, right? All right. So as it says there, these 1, 2, 3, 4 types of diabetes, you will have hyperglycemia, of course, which means excess glucose in the blood. And your glycemic index, is extremely high. And glycosuria, glucose in the blood, right? Now, if you have glycosuria, but no hyperglycemia, there are other types of diabetes that can account for it. So, for example, renal diabetes, your kidney is not reabsorbing the glucose from the urine like it should. So when you test the person's urine for diabetes, they come back positive, right? Hereditary deficiency of glucose transporters. This just means that they're born and the receptors and transporters of glucose in their body don't work so well. So it's hard for them to absorb glucose from the blood and move it into their cells. Okay? So in these two cases here, you will have glucose in the urine, the glycosuria, but if you test the blood, there will be no hyperglycemia. Okay? The blood glucose will be normal even if the urine glucose is abnormal, right? In these top four here, the blood glucose is going to be higher than normal, and the urine glucose will also be higher than normal, okay? All right. Now, if you happen to have some of the symptoms of diabetes, which one of which, of course, is excessive urination, and you test the blood and you test the urine and you find no glucose in the urine and no excess glucose in the blood, then you're left with this special type of diabetes, which we mentioned before, called diabetes insipidus, right? And this is caused by lack of ADH. Remember, ADH causes the reabsorption of water in your collecting duct. So if you lose the ADH, you can't reabsorb water the way you should. So of course, that means that you produce more and more urine, and that urine is more and more watery, right? But once again, if you test the person's blood, you test their urine, you won't find any sugar, right? So now if you didn't know, now you know, and this is only a small sample of the different types of diabetes that are available. I'm saying available like you have to go pick one, but you get what I'm saying, right? Now, we also spoke about diuretics. And you should already know that diuretic refers to a substance that increases urine output. It can do this in several different ways, right? A diuretic can block the release of ADH. No, if you have less ADH, of course, it means you reabsorb less water from the urine, you pee more. It can block the production of aldosterone. Remember aldosterone? Aldosterone causes the reabsorption of sodium back to the blood, and then that causes water from the kidneys to flow into the blood. If you have a diuretic that blocks that process, of course, more water stays in the kidneys, which then moves into the urine, right? So there are different ways your diuretics can function. But in all cases, a diuretic will cause your blood volume to go down, right? Your blood volume will come down. And why is that? Very simple. Blood is mostly water. If you're peeing the water out, the volume of the blood must go down. Makes sense, right? Now, it mentions here, you can use diuretics to help fight hypertension as well as congestive heart failure. Here's the thing with heart failure. When your heart has a reduced function, it of course means it's harder for your heart to pump the blood. If you reduce the volume of the blood, it's a bit easier to move the blood around because, of course, there's less of it. And hypertension, of course, once again, a very high blood pressure. If you lose some of the water, there's less water in the blood, hence the pressure goes down. So you use diuretics to treat these two types of conditions, right? Now, obviously, whatever the diuretic is doing, one of the things that it can happen is that it can cause an increase in glomerular filtration rate. Remember, glomerular filtration rate is looking at the volume of filtrate produced per minute. from the glomeruli of the kidney, right? So if you increase GFR, you automatically get more filtrate. And if you have more filtrate, the filtrate passes through the nephron more quickly. And the faster the filtrate passes through the nephron, the more filtrate you're going to reabsorb. Sorry, the less filtrate, I should say, you're going to reabsorb back into your kidneys, and therefore the more urine you're going to produce, right? I'm talking about reabsorption. If your diuretic blocks the reabsorption of water from the PCT and the DCT, you will, of course, automatically also get more urine, right? All right. Now, I think we also mentioned on Tuesday that the most common diuretic that you'll find, of course, is going to be alcohol. Lisa, you have a question? Your mic is open. Okay. Is alcohol, right? Alcohol will block the reabsorption of water from the collecting duct. Hence, you produce urine, and that urine is going to have more and more water in it, right? 4:45. All right. We'll look at more minutes. We'll look 10 more minutes and then stop. Anyway, now let's talk about how we actually store the urine. So once you produce the urine, hopefully y'all remember this, right? That the urine goes from cortical nephrons usually, because remember that 85% of nephrons are cortical. Then you have the juxtamedullary nephrons that are 15%, which are designed more for absorbing water. And whatever is left of the urine, once it passes through these nephrons, passes into your collecting ducts, right? And the collecting ducts, remember, are in the renal pyramid, right? I'm hoping all I'm saying here is like, oh yes, I remember all of that, sir. Right? That's what you should be thinking. Yeah, man, that sounds perfectly familiar. The collecting ducts then merge to form the renal papilla, right? And at the renal papilla, there are pores from the collecting ducts, since there's multiples of them come together, that cause urine to flow into the minor calyx, then to the major calyx, then to the renal pelvis, then down the ureters, and finally it gets stored in the bladder. That should all sound familiar to you, right? I hope so, right? Now, let's talk about the ureters themselves. As I said, the ureters from the renal pelvis pass dorsal to the bladder and enter it from below. What does this mean? It means the ureters dip down behind the bladder, then curve and come back up to attach to it. That's all that means, right? It mentions here that they're around 25 centimeters long and that there are 3 layers to your bladder. You have an adventita, right? The outermost layer. You have a muscularis with longitudinal and smooth muscle, right? And of course, the innermost layer is a layer of, and you should all know what this stuff is, transitional epithelium. You don't remember what transitional epithelium is? Let me know and I'll remind you, but I'm hoping you all remember what it is, right? If not, let me know. So those are the 3 major layers of your ureter. Now, obviously the ureter, well, maybe not obviously, but the ureter has a very narrow lumen. And because the lumen is so narrow, it is fairly easy to block it up. I'm sure we've all heard of kidney stones, right? You can have stones in your kidneys and they're a minor nuisance, but it's not any big deal. And then one day, one of the stones falls into the renal pelvis and then it just ends up in the ureter and blocks up the ureter. All of a sudden, You can't pass urine from the kidneys to the bladder anymore. And all of a sudden, what happened? Your kidneys start to swell with that excess urine, and the urine, of course, containing the urea, starts to poison the kidney, and they get inflammations of the kidney, and it's something that can potentially kill you. You never believe that a kidney stone can kill you, but it can. It's fairly rare, but it can, right? Now, look at the position of the urethra here. So it comes down from your kidneys and it goes behind the bladder, goes down a bit, then curves up to enter the bladder, the urethral opening right here. Now, the area where the urethras connect, they're roughly across from one another. And then down from them, you have the exit of the bladder. And they normally say, hey, this thing makes a triangular shape. Right? According to some scientists, say it looks like a triangle. So therefore, they call it the trigone. Tri, of course, 3. Triangles have 3 sides, right? And technically, this has 3 components: 2 ureters and a internal urethral sphincter. Okay. Now, when your bladder fills with urine, right, and it's time for you to urinate, you're going to have the contraction of the muscular wall of the urine of the bladder, and inside there you're going to have the detrusor muscle. Right? Now, follow me now. Your bladder fills. Normally it gets about 400 mils or so. And then the weight of the urine presses down right here on this sphincter. This is called the internal urethral sphincter. Once the pressure builds up enough, the sphincter pops open. Okay? Then urine now flows from the bladder down the urethra a little bit until it comes into contact with the external urethral sphincter. And the external urethral sphincter is what allows you to hold the urine, right? Now, here's the thing. As babies, we have no control over these muscles. So this internal urethral sphincter muscle here is a smooth muscle. Remember smooth muscles? You don't really have any control over them. So once the bladder is full enough, they just pop right open. Can't do anything to stop it. The external urethral sphincter now is skeletal muscle. And once again, as you know, skeletal muscle is voluntary muscle. We can control that one as you get older. Obviously, babies don't have any control over this muscle. And even as young children, there's a greater chance of you losing control of this muscle while you're sleeping, which is why normally bedwetters are children. By the way, does anybody know at what age bedwetting tends to stop? Anybody near wet bed would like to let the class know about this? Anyway, I guess not.
Sir, probably at 6.
No, say go way past that.
8. 8
12, 11,
Sir, is
10.
it 10?
It's
Probably
closer to
8.
12.
Oh,
12?
Sir, what about
By 12,
15, sir?
for the most part, if the bedwetting continues past 12, that's when it starts for it. Right? Realistically, it should be finished by 12. So what you should have happening
But they
is
have
that
16.
between like 6 and 12, the frequency of the bedwetting is supposed to start going down. And then eventually it will stop. Right? But if they're still peeing up often after 12, that is normally when parents decide, hey, this is ridiculous. It's time to look into it. Right? But it is not unusual or unreasonable, even after 12, to occasionally have the PP dream. Everybody know the PP dream, right? Some of
Oh,
you,
yes, sir.
yeah, you swear
To
blind
this
up and
day,
down.
sir. To this day.
Uh-huh. Right? And yeah, what happened? Your brain trick you, right? I look at it this way. Your subconscious wants to go to the bathroom, but your conscious mind is lazy. Therefore, your body decides to compromise. And you get the PP dream. And that is the compromise, right? You can still stay in your bed, but now you have artificially heated it. Anyway. So even to adults, occasionally you'll have the PP dream. Now, your state of mind when you go to sleep affects the possibility of having this dream, right? So, for example, people who are drunk are more likely to have the dream, right? And believe the dream. Now, this here is the urethra. This is the length of the urethra here. Now, obviously, this is a female, right? The urethra ends as an external urethral orifice or the opening. Now, female urethras are sort of short, right? They're 3 to 4 centimeters long. Because they're short, females tend to have more bladder infections than males because it's a lot easier for a bacteria to start here and make a short trip down to get into the bladder, right? Versus a male. I mean, obviously, it depends on how blessed the male is, but it usually speaking takes a longer time, a further trip. Look how far it has to go before it has to get to the bladder, right? So bladder infections, for the most part, almost 80% of the time, bladder infections, they're happening to females, not males. Then again, you do have the guys with the micro penis that of course let down the side, but you know, they can't help themselves, right? Now, we'll also mention that since we're looking at the male here, so as it says here, the male, the urethra averages 18 centimeters long. But the male urethra is divided into 3 parts. The female just has a urethra. That's it. The male has 3 different sections. Right? We have what we call the prostatic urethra. That's the part that goes to the prostate gland. And when we do reproduction, I explain to you why this is stupid. You have the membranous urethra that passes through the body wall on the way out. And you have the penile urethra, which can vary in length. Right? As I said, by the way, a rude question. Who knows what is the record for the size of the male member in inches? Who knows? Let me see. Nobody knows? All right.
Sir, may I go with
Testing said 12.
12
It's 13.5 almost.
plus?
Yeah. So you can imagine how difficult he has of getting a bladder infection, right? Probably never seen a bladder infection in his life. Now,
Sir,
yes.
sir, think of some pill or something person take for that, sir.
No, it's natural.
Natural, sir? You sure?
I mean, the guy wasn't married. Because from what I understand, his relationships don't tend to last long once him drop the hog leg. You know, most women take one look on that
I
and say, no,
wonder
no,
why.
no, thanks, and then move on with life, right? Anyway, now, all right, we're about out of time, but this now here, a lot of this, the rest of this is talking about the renin angiotensin system that we went through, right? So give this a read. Everything here we went through already in class, so it should make perfect sense to you, right? Now, I just want to mention, like, we have 3 slides left, so let me just finish them up. Micturition. This lovely word simply means urination, right? So instead of saying urinate, you can say micturate, if you want to confuse people. You can tell them, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. I require some micturating. and leave them confused as to what you in there do, right? Now, generally speaking, here's how this works. 200 mils of urine or so, I mean, these things, of course, are more like averages, that stretches the bladder and that signals the spinal nerves, right? As I said, the spinal nerves running through S2, S3, all the spinal nerves in EMP1. And that causes the parasympathetic reflex arc from the spinal cord and stimulates the contraction of the detrusor muscles. And while this is happening, the internal sphincter relaxes. So the bladder gets a little full, right? The parasympathetic system sets in. The detrusor muscles in the bladder start to squeeze down on the urine. At the same time it's doing that, the internal sphincter lets go. Remember, that one is smooth muscle. So what happens? The urine flows out of the urethra and comes down and hits in on the external sphincter, right? If you're an infant or a young child, you have no control over the sphincter. So the external sphincter pops right open too. And of course, this is why babies are famous for peeing themselves. They have no control over it, right? That, of course, is involuntary micturition. Involuntary micturition now, you have what is called a micturition center in the pons, right? So pons, one of the oldest parts of the brain, you get a signal saying, hey, the bladder is full, once again from stretch receptors, right? And the micturition center in the pons, as it says there, integrates with cortical input. This simply means that the pons of the brain is connected to the cerebrum, right? The thinking part of the brain. And because now there's a connection between the part of the brain that is involved in releasing the urine and the thinking, it means if you want to urinate, you can. You can consciously send a signal to stimulate the detrusor muscles and relax the sphincters and cause urine to come out, right? Weirdly enough, people are weird enough because if you say to somebody, hey, I need you to pee for me, all of a sudden they can't do it. You're going to find there's a lot. You know, a patient comes in, you need to collect some urine to do a urine test. You send them to the bathroom and cup and they come back and say, boy, I don't know, come out. And you say to yourself, how is that possible? There are some people's bladders get stage fright, right? And they just can't manage. So you have to also, have a little compassion when it happens to them, right? Now, as it mentions here as well, to delay urination, so you're trying to hold up the urine, as we say in Jamaica, an impulse is sent to the pudendal nerve to the external urethral sphincter, which keeps it closed. So when you really want to, as we say in Jamaica, pee-pee, but you're on a bus or something, and you try to hold it up, here, this is what you're doing. You're sending a signal to that urethral external sphincter, trying to keep the sphincter closed. Now, obviously, as time goes by and the volume of the urine starts to build up, it is going to start putting more and more pressure on the sphincter, right? Which means there's only a certain amount of time you can hold up that urine before hook or crook, as we say, it's coming out, right? That said, if you want to speed up urination, there's something called the Valsalva maneuver. You basically press down on the abdomen in a rhythmic way to help force urine out of the bladder as the patient is urinating. This is particularly useful in older males who have prostate problems and they need to empty their bladders. So the Valsalva maneuver helps them to put out that urine, okay? Now, I think, yeah. So this is basically, this diagram here just summarizes what we just spoke about, right? Now, Last slide. I just want to briefly mention how hemodialysis works. Right? We don't really have time to go through peritoneal dialysis. First of all, I think I mentioned to you that dialysis is basically short-term measures. 5 years, 10 years on the outset, you're going to die without a kidney, right? Because you remember your kidney does far more than just clean your blood. Your kidney balances your blood pressure. Your kidney balances salinity in your blood. Your kidney helps us to trigger the production of red blood cells, right? Your kidney helps with the reabsorption of calcium. There's so many things that your kidney does, not just removing urea, right? So anyway, if you're somebody with kidney failure and you need to do dialysis, here's the basic idea. First of all, they're going to put a shunt in you, okay? What you have here is that one part of the shunt is coming from an artery, one is coming from a vein. The idea here is that there's a little pump in the system, and it says gently pump. Obviously, a strong pump would not work because you'd suck blood out of the blood vessels, and it would cause the vessel to collapse. So very gently, the blood is pumped out, and that blood goes into a series of tubes called dialysis tubing. Okay? And the dialysis tubing is floating in what we call dialysis fluid or dialysate. The dialysis fluid has slightly lower than normal concentrations of very important substances like water and salt and glucose and urea too, right? And you can't use pure water. You have to have, in some cases, it has to be close to isoosmotic with the blood. So the concentration of water and salt and all these things have been relatively close, right? Only urea is the dialysis fluid really going to lack, right? In the proper concentrations. So if you have higher concentration than normal of sodium in the blood, the dialysis fluid will have some sodium, but not a lot. So sodium will leave your blood and move into the dialysis fluid because the tubing is semi-permeable. Urea, same thing, it diffuses from your blood into the fluid, right? So as the blood passes through the tubes, bathed in the fluid, it will lose these things like urea, as I said, excess salt, hopefully. And then the blood going back now to the body will, of course, therefore be cleaner, right? And as you can see here, the blood enters what we call a bubble trap here. This allows any build-up gases in the blood to separate from the blood before it returns to your vein. Obviously, if you don't want to put air bubbles in a person's blood vessels, you'll block them and kill them, right? This process here takes somewhere between 2 and 8 hours. The more frequently you do dialysis, the less time you spend doing it. But I think we mentioned in Jamaica, if you're lucky, you get dialysis once a week, which means you're going for the full 8 hours, right? So yeah. That said, people who have money can buy their own dialysis machine. I think I mentioned today around $1 million or so, Jamaican. And you can buy your own fluid and you can do dialysis at home. Once again, if you have money. But the average person, of course, can't afford to do this. And if you put water in the dialysis machine, right? Pure water, instead of water leaving your blood, it is going to be absorbed into your blood from the fluid. And of course, that makes your blood hypotonic. And remember, tonicity and hypotonic can kill your cells. So you cannot put pure water in, right? All right. So that is the last slide here. Hopefully everything I said makes sense to you. We're gonna start with electrolytes next Tuesday. Electrolytes won't take more than one class. And then we're gonna start or the digestive system next. No, electrolytes, then digestive system, right? Now on Wednesday, you know what, let's do digestion on Tuesday. The reason we're gonna do digestion on Tuesday is because we need to start digestion on Wednesday. And everything, remember, will be online for the next 3 sessions. Go ahead, Ranel.
Sir, you left some of the urinary labs down here, sir.
What do you mean I left them down here?
You didn't take up, I think, 5 urinary labs with you.
I took what was on my desk, as far as I know.
No, sir, some weren't brought with you, sir.
Yeah, some of them just magically appear after I left, I'm sure.
No, sir. Right. I'm sure they were handed in before.
Okay, if you say so.
So what should those students do, sir?
Leave them with the admin staff. I'll see what I can do. That's all I can tell at this point.
Okay, sir.
Because I ain't gonna be on down there until the 9th, right?
Right.
All right. So anyway, Wednesday, we'll talk about the digestive system lab. Obviously, it's gonna have to be an online lab. You'll be drawing sections of the digestive system, right? I think it's esophagus, small intestine, large intestine, if I remember correctly, and stomach. But I'll post it on Moodle, of course, and you all can transfer it to the WhatsApp group. And yeah, that's it. Now, I don't know if you know what's going on in Kingston, but on Monday, apparently there will be no classes, right? I am not sure if the same thing is going to happen for Mobi. There's some industrial action going on Monday. So, I think it's fair to say that the Kingston group is too far behind to have, well, they'll have to do their test in week 13 too. And they'll be leaving with at least one topic. So I guess what we'll do is we do ours in week 13. And did we agree to, what was it we agreed to? Was it reproduction or was it skin we're leaving out? Anybody remembers? I think we had said reproduction, but I want to make sure.
I think that's what was said, sir.
Okay.
Yes, the reproduction because it was the longest one.
All right, good. So that means that on the 9th of April, you'll come in, and what you'll be doing is, of course, the latter part of the urinary, which is mostly physiology, digestive system, electrolytes, endocrine, which is easy, and skin, which is easy. And we'll leave reproduction for the final exam. So that's how we're gonna work it. All right. So
Sir,
yeah.
we'll be having a lab quiz next week.
Remember, I said we have to do some online lab quizzes. When I speak to you all on Tuesday, I'll confirm, but I should be posting a urinary lab quiz for Wednesday. All right.
Sir, will you be
But I'll
posting
confirm it on
recording?
Tuesday.
How soon will you be posting this recording for this class this afternoon? How soon will you put it up on the
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should post it up at all because like 35 people here. It's like 60 people registered for the course. Where's everybody else? But that said, I'll probably put it up. I don't know, I have another class right after this. So by that see it until late tonight or early tomorrow. You don't see by Monday, give me a call. Anyway, if there are no further questions, I guess we can stop here. And I'll speak to you all again on Tuesday and we can confirm for the lab quiz. But as it stands, you should have a urinary lab quiz to do on Tuesday. Actually, you know what? It's probably better if the whole stream do the lab quiz at the same time. So maybe we can arrange to do it on a Sunday evening or so. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. Anyway, folks, we'll talk on Tuesday.